dire warning coming from some of the nation's top military commanders. Sources now say that the U.S. has gone through a dramatically high amount of a key weapon in just the past 6 months during the war with Iran. CNN senior national security reporter Zach Cohen is a part of the team that is behind this reporting. So, Zach, what are you and our colleagues learning?
Yeah, Casey, we're told that the U.S. military has actually burned through more of its stockpile of key munitions than we previously thought. And it's prompting senior military commanders to issue warnings that those levels, those inventory levels, are now dangerously low. That was a quote from one of the sources to me, Jim Sciutto and Haley Britsky. And look, specifically, we're told that 80% of the U.S. stockpile of interceptors for a key air defense system known as THAAD, that those have been used up during the Iran war so far, just in 5 months of this conflict. I mean, that's a staggering number. That's higher than the percentage that we had believed was true just weeks ago, where it was more around 60%. But that is an important system because it's the primary means, along with the Patriot missiles, that the U.S. is able to counter and take down ballistic missiles. And it's not just used by the U.S. military. It's also used by some of its key allies, including some in the Middle East, namely Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And so we're also told, in addition to those staggering low number of THAAD left in the U.S. stockpiles, that the U.S. has also gone through 50% of its Patriot interceptors. And to put that in perspective, the U.S. had about 2,000 Patriot missiles in its inventory before the war started. It has about half that number now. And so we've known that this is a concern that's been raised by General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, in these meetings with President Trump, where they've discussed options for potentially escalating the conflict. We know that Gulf countries in particular have voiced concerns also about how this stockpile shortage might impact their ability to defend themselves against Iranian retaliation if Trump does move forward with some sort of an escalation. So this is an important thread to watch, and one that's been a persistent concern for weeks now.
Hello, Bobby Jones here for MeidasTouch and Valor Media Networks. A recent Washington Post article said that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, exploded and was angry with the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. It leads me to believe that Pete Hegseth days may in fact be numbered as the Secretary of Defense. But if that is true, hopefully that's true, then it is a long time coming. I was sitting there thinking about the various issues that he's had with the Department of Defense since she's taken over. And man, I think this may be the straw that broke the camel's back. President Trump blew up at Hegseth over the weekend when he was supposed to unleash the largest military strikes since World War II. Those are his words. Only to be informed that the munitions levels that the United States has are desperately and extremely low. And apparently Trump said he thought that Hegseth had fixed it. Now, let's be clear. Hegseth fixing a munitions problem doesn't make much sense if you understand how weapons procurement work. But Trump in his reality does not necessarily understand, nor does he choose to believe that. And that is when the uniformed members of the Department of Defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, etc., all of these different people had to step in and tell President Trump that if you were to do something like this, then the United States virtually will be left defensive. This is why he lashed out at Hegseth. He had made all of these claims about how unbelievable these strikes were going to be, only to find out that he did not have the ammunition to literally back it up. But the reason I think Hegseth may not be long for staying in that position are a couple of reasons. Number one, he's got to blame somebody if this ceasefire goes through and the United States loses significant international prestige and face, which from all reports, the United States is going to lose a lot at some point here. But then also, this may be the culmination of many incidents that have brought negative limelight to the Trump administration via Pete Hegseth. Let me explain. Let's start with the scandal that really showed how his tenure as Secretary of Defense is going to go, and that was Signalgate. In March of 2025, strikes against Yemen were conducted by the United States, only to have them leaked by Pete Hegseth in the Signal app to one of the editors, actually the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. he accidentally added the editor-in-chief of one of the largest journalistic bodies in the United States, bragging about the strikes and when they were happening and just informing everybody like he was watching an actual football game. Well, operational security wise, that is huge, because if somebody, I don't know, unauthorized or in the media was able to find that information out, they could have leaked it to the world and put service members in danger. A full investigation was conducted afterwards. The IG report said that, hey, Pete Hegseth's actions could have put U.S. pilots at risk, which was a no-brainer. And instead of Hegseth being fired, the National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, was fired from his position, but allowed to be the ambassador to the United Nations on the United States' behalf. Then, once we started looking at how he handled personnel in the United States military, we come to find out that many people, now dozens of people who had worked their entire careers to get to the position of being an admiral or a general at the 1-star level, Pete Hegseth personally stopped from getting that promotion and forced them to retire. They overwhelmingly were minority candidates and women. So he shaped the force with people who he thought did not look the part by removing them from lists that the individual services were promoting and striking those names before Congress got to see them. Along those lines, on September 30th of 2025, he pulled all of the admirals and generals and most senior enlisted personnel in the entire Department of Defense to bring them to Quantico to tell them what the warrior ethos is. Mind you, these admirals, these generals, these senior enlisted had fought the nation's longest war, and apparently the failed, and I mean failed, Army major, National Guard major had to remind them of what a proper warrior ethos is. You know, despite the fact that he's had DUIs, assault against women allegations he's had to settle in court, this is the man who brought all of them together and told them they need to understand what a warrior ethos is. There are too many fat generals, fat admirals, whatever. But hey, he's going to show us what leadership looks like. And so, as everybody is trying to do their job at the Pentagon, various reports throughout the entire time he's been Secretary of Defense has shown us that people do not trust him. So people have to walk on eggshells around him, trying to do their jobs. On top of that, he kicked out the Pentagon press corps, basically severing the relationship between the media and the Department of Defense. And if that wasn't enough, he goes on social media thinking he's looking like a badass, physically training with troops and being made fun of his form. But all of that is just backdrop, because none of it, and I mean none of it, compares to how he has conducted the operation into Iran. Whether we're talking about Operation Midnight Hammer and the superlatives he used, saying how great the strikes were, only to turn back around later, months, and saying, hey, we need to do it again in epic fury, or is the amount of loss the United States has suffered, 18 military bases hit, 18 personnel killed in action, even though they're trying to change the designation of how that happened, which is disgraceful. Whether we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait being basically closed off, whether we're talking about the complete lack of strategic vision when looking at the amount of weapons the United States has used, the cost of those weapons against $1,000 drones, and how it has affected the entire defense posture of the United States. All of this is under Pete Hegseth's watch. And apparently President Trump has finally reached a frustration point with them. The question is, will he be fired? Or will they try to cover up what has happened? Or will they basically put him in a corner and make decisions on the Department of Defense without Hegseth's input? They did that with Tulsi Gabbard when she was the director of national intelligence. They did that with Kristi Noem when she was over in the Department of Homeland Security. Is Hegseth next? Because it's obvious the failures should have been enough to remove him. But with President Trump, it's the embarrassment of these actions that are really sealing his fate.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filikowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.